Speaking moistly, keep 2 meters apart. Speaking moistly.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our usual Tuesday afternoon edition of Speaking Moistly. With me, as you, I flubbed that too. With me, as usual, is Greg. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, Mark, in clown world. How are you?
Water today. Is that caffeine infused water or is that just clear coffee? Is that like the clear
It's
Pepsi?
I put citrus in it, water and a lemon. I squeeze lemon in it
Oh,
or a
yeah.
lime. Yeah.
I never liked that, mainly because the lemon seeds would get in there and I just would be like, because
So
people
what?
people would just take a lemon and I was like, okay, I could try the lemon water thing. And I tried, and the seeds, I thought, just regular water's fine. Regular water's great. But I mean, lemon water's great too.
You
You don't,
gotta
you don't,
yeah, you can't use tap water. You gotta get our filtration system.
no, I use tap water.
Com. Yeah, I don't know. I just put lemon in it. It's good. Apparently, it
Delicious.
electrifies your body in the morning.
I love it.
It's not the morning right now,
I was
but
gonna say it is absolutely not the morning. It's the opposite end of
I
the
was
day.
up
That's all
late
right. It's
editing.
okay.
Okay, I was editing.
It's
Okay,
morning-ish.
up
It's
late
almost,
editing.
it could be morning.
Yeah.
You could make an argument. So we were talking in the green room about how crazy things were a year ago with
Mhm.
COVID restrictions, with regards to mask mandates, vaccine mandates, people losing their jobs, access to a court system that would hear you and say, yeah, this might be against the constitutional or charter rights that, that piece of paper that passed in the 80s and is supposed to govern the laws and stuff, but we're not going to check it out because, we're busy and stuff. Get back to us never. Um, and it's
It was the
unbelievable.
temperature, the temperature of what the rhetoric was surrounding vaxxed versus unvaxxed.
Right.
Like there's a video I saw on Instagram posted like a few weeks ago by this young woman, and she recalled, like, guys, the week before the trucker convoy, like there was a poll done to see, like, if we should let the unvaccinated, like, if they should be thrown in jail or not, or, like, if they should
Mhm.
be persecuted or not. And there's obviously what happened in Quebec. Help me out here. What happened in Quebec again? They wanted
They had the
to
curfews. They had curfews, and were they
no
taxing? They were taxing the unvaccinated.
yes, the
Yes, they were
tax.
adding.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
And
Italy did the same thing. So did Greece.
yeah, so it's like this. I even personally look back at that stuff and I'm like, wow, I've actually kind of tried to repress these memories, because it really was, sometimes people will make jokes of, like, oh my God, is this even real? Like, the
Was.
reality we're living in. And it's like, it was even worse a year ago
Yeah.
when the whole vax versus unvax was reaching a boiling point. And the common thing, which is super disturbing, is the vaccinated sheep people don't even notice a difference to, like, today versus a year ago. Because they were unvaxxed, they didn't even really care, right? Like, it was kind of like oh, whatever.
Well,
Um,
the rhetoric really, I wouldn't even say the rhetoric has calmed down all that much. I mean, it's perhaps slowed down in the media, but people feel very comfortable uh, talking about unvaccinated people in a way that is dismissive or as like othering them. It's very ubiquitous still in Canada to get people who are upset with people who are not vaccinated, even though we have new information talking about
mhm.
how how that works, etc. And it's really quite interesting to see how comfortable Canadians got with it, because I would have said 10 years ago, Canada's not like that. No way. Canadians would be too affable to fall for it. But man, there are a lot of Canadians who really either like having that amount of power to yell at people or are that scared. And
Yeah, and I think there's the more kind of extreme, pro mandate people that are certainly quite hostile and quite terrifying, because, like, they're still into masks, they're still into, like, all this stuff. But I think what's even more nefarious, more and more, are like these centrist types that are trying to stay out of the way. um because I almost want to compare it to, like, think of a scandal that comes up in the news. Maybe a good one would be like the Me Too movement. I'm trying to think of a specific person.
SNC
uh
Lavalin,
no,
no,
let's use Me Too, because that's more kind of a normie thing that normies, like, we're on board with. or
Right.
maybe yeah, okay, yeah, let's just say it's a Me Too thing. So when the Me
Sure.
Too thing first happened, it was like, people were very sensitive to it, and like, oh my God, how dare you? How dare you? And now that the Me Too thing has subsided, but if reminded, they will go right back to that place of like, oh yeah, this is so horrible. This is so
Yeah.
terrible.
It's
And
almost branding. It's almost like
well,
foundational.
I think my
Sorry, carry
point,
on.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I think my point is like it's like a sort of mainstream scandal in which, it's almost like you blow the whistle of the scandal, and everyone's like, yeah, that was inappropriate. We didn't like that. And it's as simple as that. Like there's no real thinking about it. There's no real talking about it. There's no real talking about science. It's just like it's almost just like it's become a moral imperative, a moral reaction where it's like, okay, the people that didn't follow the rules were bad. Uh and yeah, it's as simple as that. It just sucks because the same old sort of pattern or phenomena is true, which is unless somebody gets super uncomfortable and kind of goes down the path of being red pilled, nothing changes, you know?
Well, and I mean, like, there are a lot of people who are subscribing to the new woke way of seeing things, the new paradigm that kind of is taking over at this point in time. And you have to, I mean, you don't have to really, it's not a very large red pill to agree that the canceling of people, the way people were treated a year ago by powerful politicians, by courts, people who just wanted their basic rights recognized by a government that agreed to recognize them with that paper that they put out and everybody passed and stuff. They agreed, right? So people say, listen, like we've got these rights and stuff. You would expect some kind of ability to hold them to account, but none of that happened. And
No,
so asking for too much. That's
it's
more
it,
than that's more than the Liberal Party can give right
no,
now.
but you're kind of assuming that people care at all or are engaged at all with what's going on, and that's the main part of the problem. Like I hate to say it, but a lot of these normie people are just like they're watching their Netflix. They're looking for their leisure time because outside of their leisure time, they're in work mode, and they're doing what people are living their lives. They're busy, and they don't have the time or the emotional or mental capacity to actually challenge and look into this stuff. It's so much easier to go with the flow, and and that's the big challenge of the red pill. It's not just, oh, I'm going to start like looking at things objectively. It's not just that, because I think a lot of people are struggling with trying to like, where's the moral consistency here? Where's the
Mm-hmm.
logical consistency here? And instead of questioning that and kind of, oh wow, this is giving me the no feeling, maybe I should look into this. Instead of that, they're stuck on the feed. They're stuck on the whatever MSM feed is coming to them, and it's not just CTV news. It's not just global news. Like if you look at more the normie podcasts, even the normie YouTube content, it's going to still all be echoing something similar, which is that everything is fine, even though there is no moral or logical consistency to what's going on here. It's like, don't worry about that. Look, here's a new article that says you're in the right. Here's a new article that says you're
Yeah.
you're in
So
the majority. You have nothing to worry about,
so I think you're hitting right now, you're hitting the nail on the head on what's going on. And the fact that people are seeing, so it used to be, let's compare it to a mirror. It used to be when people looked at the mainstream media, they saw that mirror and they thought it reflected reality. And they were like, man, this mirror is a great mirror. I can see my reflection. It reflects me accurately and it reflects reality accurately. But now people are looking at this mainstream media that is so coordinated, so lockstep, so in tune with exactly what the government says. It is nigh unbelievable. And they're looking at this mirror now and they say, well, it shows me accurately, but the world that they're telling me exists isn't my experience. And actually, I can kind of see through this mirror. It looks like a shit mirror. I think people are starting to see through it because of the strength of the mirage it's trying to project. It's people are saying, hold on a second, but it is, I'm not saying it's not fooling a lot of people. but there are a lot of people who are saying, oh, I don't know about
and
this.
and the other thing too that should be mentioned as well, to kind of give people some of these people more sympathy, it like the mainstream news, it's not like they're constantly lying about every single thing and they're totally ridiculous and absurd all the time. The issue with the mainstream news is that they're actually quite good, and like they're professionals at making it seem like they are reasonable, making it seem like they are coherent, making it seem like they are telling you the truth. And where things go wrong is when they, really mess up like some of the most major issues facing our society today.
Safe and effective.
Obviously, yeah, like those issues, like everything to do with the pandemic after the past 3 years. And yeah, that's why the past 3 years have been so crazy, because it's been like the typical sort of, bias from the mainstream media, except it's turned into like full-blown propaganda. And it's, hey, we're going to actually completely redefine what health means, what safety means. And
What government means? Government is now, so
mm,
it used to be
true.
that government was there to protect your safety, your, excuse me, not safety. That's what they're trying to change it into. But it was to protect your rights, basically, your basic right to choose, your right to make a choice for your body, your right to have free speech and free expression, not free speech, free expression. And all of that stuff that it said in the charter. The government's job was to basically uphold that stuff. Now they're saying, the government's job is to keep you safe. And in order to keep you safe, we have to oppress these people because they're not keeping you safe. Those evil people, those evil anti-vaxxers aren't keeping you safe. And people now feel empowered to say, you are not prioritizing my health. And so I feel comfortable sending you to a concentration camp. There was a guy buying cigarettes at the I saw a video from a couple of years from last year, from 2021. And it was a guy buying cigarettes, and he was screaming at this woman for not wearing a mask inside. And he was double, like he had two masks on, but he was gonna go smoke cigarettes. And I mean, like, man, I'm an ex-smoker, right? I Belmont
Mm-hmm.
mild king size 20s, buddy. But that was my fact. But you don't tell other people like to mind your health when you're like when you're a smoker.
Yeah,
If you're buying your own pack, man, like you're
yeah,
not even trying to quit. You're not even bumming them
yeah,
off friends, right?
yeah,
Like,
it's
oh,
pretty
I'm
bad.
quitting.
Yeah, it's like you're in your motor scooter coming from the bar. You got your big sugar drink, and you're a massive like Big Mac. We're in a pandemic. Put a mask
Yeah.
on. Are you kidding me? Yeah, yeah, we're in a
How dare
pandemic.
you
All right.
violate? How dare you put my health at risk? It's like, buddy, you're not even
Yeah.
wearing a helmet.
I don't want to breathe unvaxxed air.
And so,
Yeah.
and it's such an interesting thing because you
I, th-
you
I think
can't.
I think I think unvaxxed air might do you some good at this point,
Yeah,
to be
something might help. You
honest.
need to change things up, buddy. But it's funny because the idea that you could be responsible for my health in any way at all is unbelievable. If you're sick and you get me sick, I think that's my fault somehow. But it's
Yeah,
not your
it's
fault. Like,
it's true, and maybe we can kind of connect this to the whole like pandemic amnesty thing. You
oh
know,
my goodness.
people are like, hey, yeah, let's talk about should there be amnesty? Should there not be? It's like,
Mm.
let's talk about the major psychological operation that's been blasted upon people for the past 2 years, and how these people mentally and emotionally might not ever be the same. You know what I mean? Like
Might
that's the
not.
story.
I don't know.
It's like I'm not worried about like getting an apology. I'm more worried about these like brainwashed people, these rabid, like, the government says jump and they say how high. I'm worried
Yeah.
about like these people, and
Careful,
their
Don Cherry.
mental state, their emotional state. Like, it's I've said this before on the show probably, and I mention it to people because I think it's really important. The psychological and social consequences of this crazy propaganda campaign that's like still ongoing, but was like really, really bad in the height of the pandemic.
It's
Like
gonna.
that's going to stick with us for a while. And who knows how far reaching the consequences are going to be.
We're not done yet. We're not done. Remember Waves of Fear? I talked about Waves of Fear last year because you had the ebb and then wave of fear and then the ebb and then a wave of fear again. I told you in the green room before we started the show. University of Waterloo just mandated masks for academic academic situations. Done. Bingo, bingo, bongo,
Horrible,
buddy.
horrible. Horrible.
Right? Terrible. What are you going to do? Okay,
Awful.
so we could talk about the ongoing psychological attack, the ongoing the begging for amnesty in the face of the ongoing propaganda campaign,
Hmm.
which is, I think, part of the propaganda campaign. They can't be
Yeah.
serious.
Well, of course, that's the thing. That's why it's, oh, do you think there should be amnesty? It's like, what is the source of this amnesty thing? Oh, it's the same people who were trying to pit society against one another. It's like,
Could you appoint a
it's so
cleargy?
disingenuous. Like it's
Could you
so
appoint a
obviously
clergy for
disingenuous.
amnesty? Like, let's say, okay, we found a pandemic amnesty clergyman who will grant you amnesty from your pandemic
So
guilts if you want to.
honestly, this is kind of changing topic a bit, but I think that it's something that we really need to consider here. You know, uh, I wonder if this kind of, because as conservatives or as freedom fighters or whatever, we also consume our own version of the news, and sometimes I fear at its worst, it's keeping us stuck in some type of mental prison where it's like, all we think about is the WEF and society decaying more and more,
I,
and what are we going to do? It's
uh,
happening, it's happening, it's happening. And it's almost like, well, if we keep thinking about this, are we not almost like manifesting it in some way? Like we need, there has to be a better way to use our own mental and emotional energy than just consuming all of this like doom and gloom stuff all the time. And I'm not saying be delusional and like don't see, like don't address the things that are happening, the policy changes that are happening in this type of stuff. But also, I don't know. I just kind of think when it comes down to it, it's like, how are we going to spend the minutes in our day? And how are we going to like, tally up all the thoughts that we have, and what direction are we going to direct them in? Because I think at its worst, we get our own version of being this sort of like, mindless drone consuming headlines. Instead of being hysterical about mass and safety, we're hysterical about end times and the consequences, when we're
I'm
in
more
that
hysterical about
when we're in that,
policy.
right, but when we're in that
Bad
fear,
policy.
when we're in that fear mindset, though, it's like, are we still capable of making good decisions and actually being positive and intentional with what we're going to do next? Because
Yeah.
personally, I've certainly been overwhelmed at times when it's just like headline after headline of insanity.
Well, I often talk about how it's too big for one person to even tackle like the one, like say you want to tackle like education, right? You say, okay,
Hmm.
education. And then like which education, English or French, Catholic regular, like just regular straight up English board or Catholic board. And then there's French or English. And then, like if you do go down that rabbit hole and say, okay, I'm going to tackle all of it, and then somebody says, did you hear about the monetary policy? And you're like, what monetary policy? And somebody explains to me, like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to fix that too. You couldn't
Yeah.
possibly do both. So it's so overwhelming, like just to hear, okay, like, oh, okay, education's screwed up in Ontario and healthcare is screwed up in Ontario and
Yeah.
BC and Alberta and Atlantic Canada,
That's
and like something else is screwed up and this is screwed up, and oh, maybe getting fertilizer is going to be difficult, and food prices are screwed up and rent prices are screwed up. Right,
yeah.
gas prices are screwed up. So yeah, it seems overwhelming at times, but like, and you say, are we locked in our own mental prison? Man, like you can only allocate a certain amount of mental time to that kind of stuff, and I probably allocate more than most, and I'm affable, right? I'm okay. I'm not sobbing in a corner most of the time. I just have 5 minutes a day for that, okay, and that hasn't increased in weeks. Like,
Yeah. When we're in the green room, just for those watching, Mark's always like, what are we gonna do? Pacing around. He's like, he's just like writing on his crazy
it's
board
true.
and
It's
just
true.
like,
I have a
connecting
whiteboard
dots.
just
What are we
out
doing?
of screen here.
Ah.
Emergency
And then I have to
plans.
calm him down. I have to calm him down. I'm like, Mark, come on,
I
let's just
have
do speaking moistly. Okay. Let's just chat for a bit. Let's talk this out.
it'll
No,
be
no,
fine. It'll be
I'm
fine,
just
man. Just
kidding. I'm just
pretend
kidding.
everything's fine. No, it's, I mean, the world is going to be what it's going to be. I mean, imagine being around alive and dealing with sending your kids to schools where they're like, listen, kids, if a nuclear bomb goes off, just get under your desks. We're sure that it'll be
Mhm.
just fine.
Yeah.
Right? I would be like, please just stop talking about the nuclear bombs going off. If it goes off, we're all going to be fucking dead, right? Like, so just shut up about it. Right? Like, at least there's that. But it's one of those things. And I mean, in the 1940s, there were families who were sending their kids out to rural London, or excuse me, rural England, to escape bombings, etc., from the Blitz, etc., like
Oh wow.
1942 to 44,
Okay.
right? So like we don't have it so bad, right? Like the
Mm,
propaganda campaign is unending and kind of weird, and it's fun to poke fun at if you can see through it. But if you can't see through it, if you think Jordan Peterson is the devil, then I mean, it's kind of funny that you can't have a rational conversation about that. But all right, man, like if you want
yeah.
to like feel that way, fine. But I think that there's always a crazy crisis going on. And sometimes the crazy crisis is worse than other times, right? Cuban Missile Crisis, World War II.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was gonna say, comparing it to something like World War II is super interesting because, back then they had flyers, they had radio, they
Yeah.
had newspaper,
How
and
do you stop that?
that was pretty well lit. And at that time, you as the consumer, as the citizen, like you kind of have to put more faith in that authority because it's like, well, this is the only flyer going. This is the only flyer. There's no counter
The Germans
flyer
wouldn't put this
to
together
what.
just like on
Yeah,
a
right. Like
shoestring
you kind
budget.
of
And
have
I'm sure
to.
there's something to this.
And I think what's so unique and also challenging about the time that we live in is that we're in this time of the internet, and there is so much necessity to like emotional and mental diligence of like
Mhm,
being able to sift through information. It's the info war. It's
mhm,
a very real thing. And I think as the internet accelerates, one of those things about being diligent is really tallying your attention and time in a day and be like, okay, where am I going to spend this attention? Where am I going to spend this time
mhm.
and emotional energy? But the positive is very exciting time. Very exciting time. It like you are living through history, folks. Like, welcome to the
And
show.
yeah, somebody is going
Uh
to rewrite what happened to a very palatable experience that vilifies the right group and, makes the correct group heroes, right? So you can say, ah, those bad guys did bad things. See, the history books say
you gotta have
so.
a more positive outlook, man. These people who want to,
You've read
they're trying to enslave the whole world, man. It's not gonna
you've
work.
read 1984, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
It's a book.
It's
It's a
great.
book.
It's
Okay.
just very interesting.
Yeah.
Lots of parallels.
We're not gonna get to that point. I know we're at that point in many respects, but like it's not, they're not gonna be successful. And
I would agree.
they're trying this push right now to enslave all of humanity, and it's not gonna work. There's already like so many holes in their ship, and they just started like 2.5 years ago.
You know the chief difference between 1984 and 2022?
The number.
In no, well, no, the number. I guess so. Yes, yes, and no. The in 1984, the drink of choice was gin, and in 2022, it's obviously wine. So that's just different, just a little difference.
As in like people are whining or
No, like they drink like people now, like everybody's drinking wine. It's like wine time. People use wine to escape. In 1984, they were using gin. Well, the main character was using gin, and it was
I think
approved gin, etc.
I think the difference is there's all sorts sorts of sedatives now.
Yes, you're not wrong
Like
there. Fentanyl would also probably be
they've
in there.
legalized marijuana. Like
Well,
I don't know if you're aware of this thing called the internet with live streaming. Like, that's a sedative in and of itself.
it's true.
Like there's people are hooked in. They're jacked
Yes,
into something, caffeine.
they love it.
They love it. Yeah.
It's true. Um, I want to talk about the emergency hearing, the Emergency Act invocation inquiry. Have you been watching any of this?
I've been watching highlights. I've been seeing clips here and there. I'm in this interesting group chat of people who kind of like post highlights and things like this.
Oh, cool. You
Um,
have to share the link with me. I'm
sure, yeah. So it's I don't really know what there is to say because I feel like I'm kind of like really close to it, like too close to give an objective take, but it just seems like more and more nonsense. Like I made a tweet about it the other day where
well, do you
this Paul Champ lawyer is saying like, look, we found a video clip of there's honking in the background, and this was after the injunction was made. And it's like, okay, so
this is the Emergency Act.
we went from
This
like
makes it necessary.
we went from terrorism, violence, arson to, oh, there was honking during the day in this video clip. Like we went to that like real quick.
Yep.
Like this is there's so many big pieces. There's so many big points that you can just underline and say, like, mean country, saying that they were blocking a roadway, like, like these sort of, they're so obviously grasping at straws at this point.
Yep.
And meanwhile, the narrative on TV is they're still they're still cobbling it together to make it look like, oh well, they weren't organized, so this is an emergency.
Yeah.
It's very as I said in the past, it's like the benefit is the same as the benefit of when the trucker convoy was going on. These people are looking really incompetent. The media is looking super biased and unfair, along with politicians. And yeah, like this is really kind of just instructive of how deranged this I don't even call it a Canadian government anymore. They're a regime. They're acting like a regime. Why are they putting forth so much effort, so much effort to basically persecute their own citizens instead of talking to them? The most frustrating thing for the past 3 years is we are just not having an honest conversation on the most important topics. And this has been the whole thing with Speaking Moistly. The newest one is, oh, we're going to talk about the Emergency Act and how it was justified. It's like, okay, so we're not going to talk about how mandates totally make no sense. We're not going to talk about how this pharmaceutical product is totally sketchy. We're not going to talk about how this virus itself is totally not nearly as deadly as people say. And also, we're not going to talk about lockdowns and how those are totally messed up as well. It's like none of those honest conversations are happening still. And there's
all we get is a dishonest inquiry into the Emergencies Act, the thing that basically stopped the ridiculousness.
Yeah.
For a
period. And that's why people like us are, well, I can't speak for everyone. That's why people are like us or like myself are losing our minds, because it's like, okay, can we have this honest conversation? No, we're just going to keep pushing propaganda and lies down people's throats to try and justify our agenda.
It's like, used as a distraction though. It's not even just like we're gonna do this propaganda nonsense. There's a purpose for it.
Sure.
They push it forward, and I mean, it's nonsense, and I can see that it's nonsense, and I can look at it for what it is. And you said earlier in the show that news people are really good at making it seem like they're covering something fairly, but they leave out really important things. They cover it in such a way that it sounds like one thing, whereas if you know a key piece of information, it would look very different. And so it's interesting to me because I was going to ask you how you think that the inquiry is going. I think, and me personally, and you answered that anyway, but me personally, I think it makes Trudeau look bad. So do you think that the inquiry is going to come out with anything that is impactful in this government? Do you think that it will have any impact? Do you think it'll derail them, or do you think it'll be a $500 fine and a slap on the wrist?
For who? For Trudeau?
Yeah, the Trudeau-Singh alliance.
Dude.
I know. Well, that's what I've said too. I don't think that there's anything. The stakes are unclear, and it seems like in unclear stakes there are no stakes, right? Like,
but just based on basic pattern recognition of what we've seen since Trudeau's been in office, their whole policy has been deny. To this day, Trudeau has never admitted he's done anything wrong ever. And if it has, it's because, Canada didn't take the Jews like 100 years. That wasn't you. That wasn't even something that you were responsible for.
Oh, like when he apologized.
That's the only type of thing.
Canada.
Yeah. That's the only type of thing he's apologized for. He's never actually addressed and taken accountability for the negative consequences of his own actions. So no, there's no chance in hell that that's going to start now after this EMA inquiry. It's going to be something where,
well, it's a bit out of his control, but it's a bit out of his control in that the inquiry was called for within the Emergencies Act itself, which he didn't have any control over. The Emergencies Act was in place before, like he didn't put that in. That was in place before he was in charge, right? So he couldn't declare the War Measures Act. It was the Emergencies Act, and the Emergencies Act called for this investigation. So that was outside of his control, but everything else is within his control. I agree with you there.
So calling the EMA was not in Trudeau's control?
No, it was set out as soon as he used the Emergencies Act. the inquiry was necessary. That was part of the Emergencies Act. So as soon as
Oh,
that
the
happened,
inquiry
the
was.
inquiry
Okay.
itself was part of that. So it wasn't something that ad hoc got done through Parliament, because it would never have got done because Trudeau would have scuttled it. But as he couldn't scuttle it, then he had to take some kind of control of it over
Are
it.
you
So he's
are you sure about that? When you call the Emergencies Act, there's going to be an inquiry no matter what.
yeah, yeah.
Did
It,
that
it calls for it
did that
calls for the
happen?
report.
Did that
It
happen with
calls
it? Did that happen with FLQ?
No, because the FLQ is so the FLQ is the War Measures Act. When they called the War Measures Act, it wasn't the Emergencies Act then, and so
Oh,
they
gotcha,
wanted
gotcha,
more oversight. So they said, and so they passed the
gotcha.
Emergencies Act with the oversight of this report. But there's no if like somebody declares an emergency and it's not an emergency. If somebody declares wolf, there's no uh, cries wolf clause, right? If
Hmm.
there's a if they're a lying liar, then
Yeah.
nothing, right? Like, and
So,
that's what I'm concerned about. There's nothing articulated within the act that says if this is used improperly, then the sitting government goes to election, or then the leader of the party is responsible is removed. Nothing like that. There's no parameters. There's no nothing as far as I understand it. And so when I look at that, I think to myself, at most, they'll have a monetary fine, maybe for the ministers involved, but probably not. I can't even see it.
but where would that monetary fine come from? Because as you just mentioned, there is no sort of guidelines or framework
Exactly.
for when this happens. So the idea that anyone is going to be disciplined whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
no. The conclude if you want to know what the conclusion is going to be, we can just look at what the news is saying. The news is saying, "Oh, well, look at all these things the protesters did." Like they're bringing up every single possible
Totally
reason
justified, right?
as to why it might be justified.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the conclusion is going to be uh maybe that it was justified, who knows, like, because that's the thing. This EMA inquiry is simply radicalizing people in either direction. It's polarizing people even further in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., if you're a convoy supporter, if you're a regular person, then you're like, oh, wow, yeah, this regime really is corrupt. This is messed up. Here's another example of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're some, brainwashed sheep, if you're some Canadian normie, you're watching the news and you're like, oh, wow, like they're really looking into this. And these convoy people were really disorganized. Yeah, they really, there's all this like backhanded things that they say about the convoy organizers, right? Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
throwing more dirt on those people. So they're going to hate the convoy people even more, or the, anti-mandate people even more. And then I worry that the conclusion will be, oh, it was justified, or, well, maybe it wasn't totally justified, but we need to make sure something's for sure. We need to make sure this never happens again. We need to make sure that this never happens again. Therefore, let's turn this into some legislation where you can't, have a protest with trucks because it was way too epic and effective. Like that's what I think the conclusion that they're going to kind of go toward, which is, oh, if you want to, you know what, they're going to add layers of protection and bureaucracy to protect the ruling class, and be like, oh, now if you want to protest, this is what it's going to be. Yeah. So the conclusion of the EMA inquiry is going to be, oh, if you want to protest in Ottawa ever again, you need to be fully vaccinated.
Yeah, yeah.
You
There
need
you go.
to, yeah, you need to fill out all these forms. You need to have your vax passport if you want to protest in downtown Ottawa
Otherwise,
again.
otherwise,
Something to that effect, though, where it's like, oh wow, so now you want to create legislation to make it impossible to have something like the trucker convoy happen ever again. When I think in reality, we should be pushing for the opposite, which is to enshrine trucker convoy to be like a what's it called, a like an emergent,
annual.
and not
Yeah.
annual, but like
Oh.
we need to ensure in like a constitutional country that a trucker protest can happen, because that is like a fail safe. When you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, it's like it's a fail safe. When the ruling class has failed the nation so much, all the blue collar workers come out with their trucks to show up and be like, you fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's keep that a thing, because it really was like, yo, we got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, that worked.
Well,
It
and
didn't, and
it was
immediately it didn't
proven that
work.
there was no
It didn't
foreign
work.
there
It
was
worked. It
yeah,
worked.
and there was no foreign funding, and it was Canadian driven, and all sorts of stuff. And well, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think the idea that having the ability to protest is very important, and I don't think you're far off that they'll use the inquiry to push further legislation. We all learned our lesson, and next time we'll never let this happen again. In
Yeah,
that
because
protesters won't be allowed to.
And it's
Yeah,
pretty
congregate.
it's pretty congruent with some of the weird stuff they've been passing, because have they not been passing something in Ontario where if you protest in a certain way
Yeah,
that like you'll get something really messed up, but we'll take your property or something like
yeah.
this.
Well, they talked about removing people's trucks and removing ownership and all that stuff. But yeah, they've gotten very draconian in order to
Hmm.
put a poison pill in anybody's pipe who has an idea that they might want to do that. So, but
Yeah,
anyways,
so
dude, we
it's
got to wrap it up because I got to
yeah.
go to pick some people up. So final thoughts and where can they find you?
Uh, Final thoughts is, just take care of your attention throughout the day. Take care of your mental and emotional energy throughout the day, because thinking that, oh, maybe if I just make this tweet, maybe if I just do this or do that, sometimes that can just really add up to a bunch of time that maybe isn't super productive, as reading a book or going for a walk, for example. But anyway, you can find me on Greg Wycliffe YouTube channel. Just dropped another interview for the Trucker Convoy two-parter,
Hmm,
where this Punjabi guy talks about how CBC creates racism. It's actually quite interesting.
interesting.
But yeah, I'm on other things, but yeah, you can find me. Thanks for having me, Mark.
Always, man. It's always nice to see you. You can find me at CanadaPoly.com and all the other places that I do the things that I do. And thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Speak